How changing my mindset from wildly hopeless to wildly grateful has helped me cope with collapse. Coping. I am one person, one single human. I alone cannot fix all the problems leading to collapse. I don't see a group organizing, yet, to do whatever it takes to prevent collapse from happening either. I have pivoted from feeling wildly hopeless to wildly grateful. The first half of my life has been spent enjoying the comforts of Western life, something I've taken for granted until just recently. Accepting collapse also included realizing how special those modern-day comforts really are. Safe running water, reliable electricity, comfortable furniture, Western medicine, kitchen appliances, washer/dryer, a car, 24/7 internet access, food still in the grocery store, trash pickup, soft linens, soft pillows, all of it. The majority of human beings that have ever lived on this planet did not have all of those luxuries at their disposal. Accepting collapse meant accepting that a lot of those comforts will go away in the future. I have zero control over it. I can't force corporations or governments to operate in ways that will not kill humanity. Besides, was us having all that bullshit sustainable anyways? Obviously not, because we're actively watching collapse happen. It has taken the exploitation and suffering of countless human beings, mostly POC and underdeveloped countries, and the earth itself to make it possible. Instead of feeling hopeless, I work on feeling grateful that I won the where I was born lottery and have enjoyed the level of comfort that I have. Most human beings that have ever lived throughout all of history couldn't imagine the state of luxury and convenience I have been living in my whole life. So I feel grateful, because I know one day it will drastically change and I won't have the same level of comfort anymore. Also, daily meditation practice is crucial. I'm so grateful this has brought so many people a little bit of joy. I've really been struggling with a dark depression after becoming collapse aware. I've realized that I'm useless to myself, my family and friends, and society in that state of mind. Suffering from depression about collapse keeps me from being able to actually do something about it. If this can help even one person create a light at the end of the tunnel for themselves, it was worth the hate I knew I'd get by sharing this in this sub. Oh, and I was serious about the daily meditation thing. Thanks everyone.
I've had a fairly similar experience. It's not exactly novel to me, though. This is largely what camping is all about. It's a great occasional reminder about how nice and easy life is normally at home. It's often at least as rewarding to go home as any of the experiences during the actual camping portion, even though I love those too. Things like a hot shower, a quick and easy hot meal, and laying down in a warm soft bed are almost too good to believe after a few days roughing it in the woods. Similarly, doing anything directly with your own hands now and again can really increase your appreciation for those things the rest of the time when others are doing that hard work on your behalf. For example, after trying to grow broccoli for many years, I'm amazed at how plentiful and cheap it is. I usually spend a lot of valuable garden space for the plants, as the harvest amount is relatively tiny compared to most other crops. I also take a lot of losses due to various pests. Also, peas amaze me. Whenever we tear open a bag of frozen peas and heat up a big batch for dinner, I stop and think how many countless hours of effort that would have taken me to do by hand. The time spent shelling alone is mind-boggling.
After years of failed gardens, I learned that the best plants seem to come from discarded cherry tomatoes and pumpkin seeds tossed in the yard. I've had literal hedges of fancy, multicolored Costco tomatoes producing more than I could eat while the store-bought ones wither. Same thing with pie pumpkins, and ornamental ones for that matter. I've still got bags of pumpkin puree I need to use from the summer. With droughts, pests, and crazy heat, we might as well make use of the crazy resilient GMOs that are used commercially.
The funny thing is most commercial plants are hybrids and don't breed true. You're not getting all that GM tech, just random plants. But I tip my hat to you, fellow seed dumper and neglector, smiley face.
I definitely encourage, maintain, and propagate volunteers. If a plant is tough enough to make a go at it on its own, that often indicates it's pretty happy in my local climate, and I try to expand on those happy successes, leaving plenty of their cast-off fruit and seeds to try again the following years. Carefully observing and then eventually responding thoughtfully to what happens naturally is a big part of my style of gardening. I have also had some very successful locally adapted varieties of tomatoes. They're often not where I'd like them to be, but I try to work with where they decide they want to live as best I can. Last year I ended up with a bunch of butternut squash in my strawberry patch, as those are some of my most prolific volunteers around here, where after planting them once, I have never had to replant them manually. I mostly just steered the squash vines into the walking paths, to keep them from totally swamping the strawberries, which were eventually eaten by a raccoon anyway, which I then trapped. Everything worked out pretty well with the squash, and they also kept weeds down in the paths, but I did have to tread carefully to avoid crushing the vines. By just leaving things be, while continuing to observe them, I've discovered many interesting things. For example, rather than hauling off a bunch of brush we cut down from around the buildings and burning it as we often had, I instead have been just piling it in areas where I want to build up the soil long term, such as a long trench that settled into a minor depression. I piled up a couple feet of brush all along that and just left it to slowly compost into the soil over time. That's working fine, but I also found it amusing that the rabbits now live there and seem to love it, which keeps them mostly away from the garden now, as that's further away. While I don't appreciate bunnies chowing down on all my garden goodies, and the fences never keep out all the tiny young bunnies, I do love to see them romping around out back. They're fun to watch, and in an emergency, with my large stockpile for my pellet rifles and .22, they'd make another moderate addition to our food supplies. I think of this often too. Only royalty would have soft beds and mattresses, pillows, a closet full of clothes. I've learned a lot about the supply chain in the past 2 years, like many of us, and it's crazy to think how American households are full of soft fabrics and textiles that only the rich and royalty would have had just like 200 plus years ago. Makes my towels feel just a little softer when I remember that.
A lot of us sit on a porcelain throne, shit in it, pull a lever, and it disappears. Wash our hands with hot, on-demand running water. Brush our teeth with bristles and paste to prevent cavities from insanely high-protein, fatty, salty, sweet foods. Get in a shower of hot running water and use incredible smelling soaps. Then dry off with one of those fabrics. Flip off the overhead electric light and fan, and close a door. Seriously think about that, just the act of a typical morning routine. Puts anything Louis XIV had to shame. Except, whatever he had was gold-plated and handled by servants. And the whole syphilis and cholera, etc. To some out there, I'm not at all saying, be happy with what you have and lick the boot. I'm just saying stop and think about how FKNG amazing that is from a historical perspective. So enjoy that hot shower. And let's fight for those that don't have that luxury to get it.
Perhaps I'm drowning in nihilism, but despite the countless placating creature comforts of this civilization, I can't feel grateful for them with the understanding that their existence comes from unquantifiable amounts of human misery and rivers of blood. And beyond that, a denuded biosphere. That might be because I'm deep within suicidal ideation and have become anhedonically numb to most of these pleasures. I could appreciate them far more if they weren't the soft chains that keep me drugged enough to be a semi-productive citizen within the maw of end-stage capitalism. The only reason I'm writing this here is because I have no community. I don't appreciate the internet despite its innumerable benefits because this place really is my place of last resort before I dive into death.
Besides, was us having all that bullshit sustainable anyways? Obviously not, because we're actively watching collapse happen. It has taken the exploitation and suffering of countless human beings, mostly POC and underdeveloped countries, and the Earth itself to make it possible. I wonder to what extent this is true. Everyone having a car and smartphones that need to be replaced every 2 years is unsustainable, sure, but did it really have to be like this? In theory, we could have had the population peak and be maintained at a much lower level and still have beds, chairs, vaccines, running water, and probably even electricity and other luxuries. What actually pushes the world to collapse is the story of infinite growth, of making products that break fast and can't be repaired, mountains of clothes that are thrown out without ever being used, the continuous hunger for new markets and raw materials that shows no mercy for anyone.
I agree. I'm 40, and the vast majority of history either didn't hit my age at all, or didn't make it there without enormous struggle and hardship. I tell people this in real life at mental health support groups. I'm lucky enough to make it 40. Every day is a gift. Every day is just icing on the cake. I'm not preaching to you, but religion is monumentally helpful to me. The Old Testament is essentially about the collapse of the ancient Israelites. I find a lot of parallels there with our present time. But I read the Old Testament backwards, start with the end, go back to the beginning. Cheers!
I think about this all the time. I've had such a whirlwind of a ride. A decade ago I was homeless and couch surfing, living off of $20 a week while breaking my back working for UPS. I've spent the last 3 years living the urbanite life in the high-rises and penthouses and making video games. Life always changes. I don't think you can appreciate the fresh ocean breeze on your face when you're worrying about how you're going to feed yourself this week, but boy oh boy, do I cherish those moments now. I emigrated to Canada pre-COVID, and flew home to visit family in the SE United States for the first time last fall. Just feeling the sand, the water, the sun, all these things again after fearing I may never get the chance to, COVID fears, was such a vault-worthy moment. I spent as much time as I could at the beach. It was just like a reunion with an old friend. I joke now with my girlfriend about how times are changing. And we're both aware that our life right now is a very pleasant, happy bubble. But we came from less, and thus, recognize how much more we have, and with that recognition the knowledge that it can't get much better, but it can certainly get worse from here. It's grounding, and strangely comforting, to know you're in the good days while you're still there.
This whole comment made me feel so warm. I feel like my goal right now is to savor each of those special moments so deeply and ingrain them in my memory. Easy access to travel is something I recognize will probably change drastically in the years to come. It's great to hear you were able to get home to visit. The moment at the beach sounds wonderful. I've gone on a couple small trips during COVID, and even though they were simple, I know I'll treasure those memories forever. I had access to a car, gas, money, hotel, and leisure activities. What a time to be alive. And knowing collapse is happening makes me even more grateful for the experiences. Also pretty jealous of your emigration to Canada. LOL. Cheers to you for getting out before the next election.
This seems like the inverse to my experience. I grew up in a back-to-the-land hippie shack, without running water. I always felt, and still feel, cut off from society around me. The northern cold is in my bones, and the silence of the trees will haunt me forever. I sipped my younger years as a communist/socialist/left anarchist. I want people to be well and happy, and would not advocate for a forced population decline, which would be bloody, racist/sexist/ableist, etc. I ignored my heart to try to make the best of the world we live in. So long as the logic of maintaining civilization for humanitarian reasons was possible, I was content to shield my distaste for modernity. All you crazy people with your noise make me crazy. I have sensory processing issues about all of the modern world: exhaust fumes, slinky fabrics, and noise. People everywhere. It's exhausting and awful. But I was willing to deal, so long as it was the humanitarian route. The world shouldn't burn just so I get peace and quiet. But once it became obvious that the world was going to burn no matter what I do, I'm free. I can be my happy little primitivist self. I can enjoy the things I like about civilization, indoor plumbing and modern medicine, and despise the things I don't without guilt. Just FYI, none of this is meant to delegitimize OP's post or take away from it. I'm glad they have found peace and joy and that it has touched so many. Just speaking of my own experience of liberation from the dread of collapse.
Why are you grateful for this convenience and security? They don't help you be a better, stronger person, quite the opposite. Wouldn't you prefer to be stronger, better able to handle illness, able to survive difficult times, physically independent, and have an unselfish community around you? Being born in this age was not winning the lottery. All other ages would probably claim the same anyway because it is the only times they know. Humans probably peaked in the 18th century, when there was clean air, ambient silence, meaning far less insanity, people were fitter, food was tastier and more nutritious, our immunity was so much stronger. Might have even peaked just before the transition to an agrarian lifestyle. Either way, you may be grateful, but it isn't based on historical fact, only historical perception, which is always skewed in favor of the present.
Beautiful take. I find myself learning more about Buddhism and attachment, and I'm even finding specific workshops on the climate crisis and attachment. It's helped me a lot when coming to terms with the radical change we are experiencing, and learning new things about my body. I think our bodies and brains will change a lot during collapse, and not even all for the worse. I have already noticed a heightening of intuitive capabilities since the pandemic, and I've been asking my peers as well, and a lot of them agree. I like to think of it as apocalypse superpowers, and while I'll be leaving an old life behind, I get to at least look forward to a body and spirit more in sync with nature.
The way you have formed this post is curious. I think collapse is inevitable, so there can be no group forming to stop it. How could it be done in any future accessible to us? We can't continue mining non-renewables forever to feed the maws of industrial machines. We can't stop the topsoil from being blown away, and so forth. So we will lose a lot of population in the energy-intense parts of our civilization. As to being grateful, yet maybe. I suppose that by historical standards, it has certainly been the strangest time ever to be alive. Literally. Nothing like it existed before, and nothing like it shall come after. This was one-time deal. This about 300-year energy high window where we probably come close to killing ourselves off for good at the end of it. It is a privilege to experience it, even if the tale is nowhere near as pleasant as the beginning. But I would personally rather exist in the position where world is large, humankind small, and future unknowable. In such a world, it would be possible to believe that there is a future, something to look forwards to, and you would not have to carry this knowledge as a futile burden. Knowing that every future day will trend towards worse makes one appreciate all that there is right now, but the knowledge also brings hollow feelings of loss and decay, and the rather depressing impression of the impermanence and pointlessness of life as conceived in this universe. Not to mention the trepidation of the changes that are coming and hardship ahead, both personally but at world at large. Famines, wars, refugees, fires, floods. The low-intensity apocalypse will take from us until we have nothing left, and then take some more.
I know what you mean. We can live in apprehension or thank God that the grocery stores are still stocked. You can have a warm shower, pop some Netflix on, etc. We're spoiled compared to what the future holds. Think of all the homeless people freezing right now outside at night, or sulfur miners in Indonesia who aren't expected to live past 50 years old, killing themselves to mine devil's gold. The other night as I walked around my friend's nice subdivision alone, I felt so grateful just to be able to choose what direction I'm walking in, have the leisure time to go for a stroll and to not be harassed while moving through space. Walking in the street while there's no one around, it feels like heaven or another planet. This isn't reality. My cushy working class life isn't reality. I haven't done anything to deserve living without chronic illness and pain. I should be sleeping outside during the winter like the homeless. Why them and not me? Every breath you take, every moment you can have to yourself, and each decision you are able to execute is a gift. Prisoners can't enjoy that. Black Americans can't enjoy walking alone in the suburbs at midnight without feeling wary. Just so many little things. I can't believe capitalism is still functioning and the stores are still stocked, even if the system may be limping along at this point. I sit inside restaurants now with this feeling of awe and wonder. Doesn't matter if the food is average. I think about the number of people that needed to be physically involved to make my plate of food, how ruthlessly inefficient the process was, how many stupid jobs exist just to service the ingredients alone. I just look at it and fully grasp just how in the fuck was a process so convoluted, involved and void of humanity meant to be fucking sustainable. It wasn't. It isn't. I am grateful that the meal exists. That I can without hesitation pay a price that is way too low, and experience a little bit of comfort knowing we are probably some of the last people on earth to experience fine food in such a setting. In very much the same way, my gratitude for the wonders of modern life outweigh the waves of regret, complacency and hopelessness. Take some pleasure in life's changing phases, there was no way it could last forever.